What's going on there, YouTube? And welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where I sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. Today, we're going to jump back over to Marvel Comics and we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that I put out there that tells an overarching story. I take those videos and combine them together into one single video. So you have the ability to have the story in one single video. Now, today, we're going to do Messiah Complex. This was a huge story in X-Men comics because after the House of M event, where the Scarlet Witch said no more mutants, there was a time in Marvel Comics there were no new mutants being born until Messiah Complex, the birth of Hope Summers. And with her birth, it led to a big war between many different groups out there who wanted her. And this is the complete story of that event. So I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. Here we go, Messiah Complex.
Into this storyline, something to remember here, guys, that this takes place a year or two after the House of M storyline, where the Scarlet Witch went crazy and took away most of the mutant population powers. And so right now, all you have is a few hundred mutants left on the planet. To begin today's storyline, we pick up with some of the X-Men right now on the Blackbird flying into a small town in Alaska. Now, the reason why they are going to Alaska is because they are looking for something in this town that is related to a mutant. Now, when they arrive to the city here in Alaska, all they find is destruction. The whole city has been wiped out clean and buildings are still on fire at the moment. That is when you have the story shift over a few hours before the X-Men left the school, where we pick up with Beast and Charles Xavier, where we see Charles using Cerebro to see all the mutants left on Earth, only to see that there are a few hundreds left on the planet. That is when he gets a huge feedback that shocks him and destroys Cerebro, which tells him for the first time in a couple years a new mutant has been born. Now, jumping back to the present day, we pick up with the X-Men right now trying to find survivors, where Wolverine tells the others that what they are seeing is a result of a battle between two sides, which Wolverine tells the other X-Men that one side was the Marauders, which are a bunch of mutants who work for Mr. Sinister. Then you have Nightcrawler tell the X-Men the other side was the Purifiers, a religious group who believes God sent them to kill all mutants on Earth. Now, this tells the X-Men that basically these two group of people were able to get there before them. And so now you have Cyclops and the rest of the X-Men wondering how in the world did these two group of people were able to figure out that a new mutant was born before them. Now, you do have this young lady walk out of nowhere, but you do have Emma Frost read her mind to see what happened here between the Purifiers and also the Marauders. And you have Emma Frost see that these two sides were both here for this one child, that they came here looking for this young child because she is the first mutant born in a couple years. And so you have Emma Frost say, we have to keep looking. Now, after the X-Men found out that basically both sides came here for the new mutant, you have the X-Men go to the hospital. And that is where you have Emma Frost find records that last night there were 3 children that were born last night. But then you have Cyclops and the rest of the X-Men tell her that they only see 2 cribs here, which means that the third child is still missing and is out there. And so the big question is, though, where is that third child? Where is the child who is a mutant? Do the Purifiers have the child, or do the Marauders have the child? But while the X-Men leave to go back home to the X-Mansion to plan their next move, in the shadows, we see a creature. We come to find out that that creature is Predator X, a monster that was made to hunt down mutants and kill them. Now, the second chapter opens up with Cyclops and Emma Frost watching the news of what happened in Alaska. Now, this section of the story was really used as a way to show the relationship between Cyclops and Charles Xavier. What I mean is that ever since the Deadly Genesis storyline, where we found out that Cyclops had another brother besides Havoc, Charles Xavier kept it as a secret, and also the fact that there was a secret X-Men team that was killed back when the X-Men were trapped on COPPA. And so ever since those secrets got out, Cyclops looks at Charles Xavier with distrust. But with this section of the story shows that Charles wants to be part of the big decisions that are going on with the X-Men. But Cyclops and Emma Frost keeps Charles Xavier on the sideline, but as someone who's just hanging around because he has nowhere else to go. Now we pick up with Wolverine and a few other members of the X-Men looking for some ex-Acolyte members. Now back in the early 90s, the Acolytes were a group of people who used to work for Magneto. As time went on, they followed other people, but they are mutants who are part of the X-Men comics as bad guys. Now the reason why you have Wolverine team looking for these ex-Acolyte people is to see if they'll still be able to give the X-Men a location of the Marauders, one of the two groups who were in Alaska fighting over the newborn mutant. Now we do pick up with Cyclops and Emma Frost at the X-Mansion, meeting up with Jamie Madrox and Richter. Now, Jamie Madrox is known for being able to make multiple clones of himself, while Richter was this mutant who had the ability to gather information about an object, person, or a location just by looking at that certain thing. Also, he had the ability to cause seismic waves as well. But thanks to the House of M event, he lost all of his abilities, and so right now he is just a human being. Now, Jamie Madrox also brought Layla Miller with him, which she is just a girl who has the powers to know things. Legit, that is her powers, to just know things. Now you have Cyclops get Jamie, Richter, and Layla up to speed on everything that had happened so far. But then you have Cyclops tell Richter why he was called. Since he lost his powers, he is just a human being. And so Cyclops is going to send him in undercover to see if the Purifiers have the baby. Now we do get a 2-page setting where we see the Professor talking to Beast, which these two have a close bond because Beast was one of the first few X-Men, and so Beast and Xavier kind of go to each other to get a little help on certain topics, which we see that the Professor is worried about the whole Cyclops not trusting him. Now we come to find out that from Cyclops that Wolverine and his team from earlier were able to get a lead on where to find the Marauders and Mr. Sinister. And so now they can see if the Marauders have the baby or not. Then we close the second chapter with Predator X still out there running around killing mutants, which he is getting closer and closer to the X-Men. Which we pick up with Wolfsbane, who is this character who has the ability to turn herself into a werewolf kind of character. Now, the reason why we pick up with her is because this is Cyclops' plan to get Richter in with the Purifier group, which you have her attack one of the group base and then tries to leave, which she runs into Richter where he pretends to shoot her because he hates her. But they make it seem like she got away only because of luck. But really, it was part of the plan. After she leaves, Richter gets some of the group members to fall in love with him because he makes it seem like he really does hate mutants. Now we pick up with Jamie Madrox and Layla Miller meeting up with Forge, which Forge is a mutant who has the ability to make anything. Like, thanks to his powers, he can be Iron Man somewhat. Now, we come to find out that he was able to make a time machine, but he has been able to kind of look for certain things in the time stream, which leads to him to say that ever since the birth of this new mutant, the time stream gave birth to 2 new time branches, meaning that now there are 2 possible futures. And so Cyclops' goal is to have Jamie Madrox make clones of himself, send them into these 2 future outcomes. Then when they are done and disappear, everything they learn after they die will be sent back to the original Jamie Madrox. Now here comes the big problem. When Forge is sending the clones out there into the different futures, Layla Miller jumps in the time machine and is now trapped in the future with one of these clones. Which, to close the 3rd chapter, we pick up with Richter being able to trick the purifiers to let him in. Now, the big thing about this point of the storyline is to show that the purifiers have some high-tech gear, but also the fact that they have a ton of different weapons, meaning that they are loading up and getting ready for a big war on the mutant race, or what is the last of it. They know that there are only a few hundred left of the mutant race. Now we pick up with the new X-Men, which are basically a 2nd generation of the New Mutants, which a group of X-Men characters who are in training basically. Now, they are watching the news about what had happened in Alaska with the Marauders and the Purifiers, which the new X-Men, they legitly hate the Purifiers because a few months back, they attacked the mansion and killed a bunch of their friends. And so the new X-Men feel like they should go after the Purifiers to get revenge, but also to be heroes. Now we all know how this is going to go down with the X-Men who are in training, trying to go out on their own to do something big. And so we do pick up with Richter again, which this is only a 2-page setting where we see him still pretending to work with the Purifiers to learn if they have the baby, but also the fact what other things they are up to as well, which he finds out that they have multiple bases with the same amount of loads of weapons ready to go, but also they have a new group of people to work with. The question is, who are their new group of people they are teaming up with? Now we pick up with Layla Miller and one of the clones of Jamie Madrox. Now remember that they are trapped in one of the 2 possible futures, where at first it seems like everything seems normal. But once Layla and the clone of Jamie go to an old library, they find some information that they captured all of the mutants and put them in a camp. So kind of like Days of Future Past, but this is a different future. But you have Layla and clone of Jamie go to this camp to just get a look at it, and they see that it is a huge camp that is heavily guarded. Now we do pick up with Wolverine and his team of X-Men, where we see him right now heading to the possible location of the Marauders, which all we get in this chapter is them arriving and getting ready to battle against them. That is it really for them in this chapter. But we do jump over to the new X-Men attacking one of the bases of the Purifiers because they want to get revenge. And so they send in Enola to kind of sneak into the base to take out some of the guards. But he runs into Richter, the guy Cyclops sent in to go undercover to gather information about the purifiers, which he tells Enola to tell the rest of the new X-Men to get out of here because the purifiers have joined up with some new people, which while he is trying to tell him more, that is when you have the new X-Men attacking this base of the purifiers. And so it is a full-on battle until out of nowhere, Hellion, which is one of the new X-Men, gets stabbed in the chest by Lady Deathstrike, who is part of the Reavers, which are a bunch of people who went through a process to get cybernetic body parts to help them kill mutants. But we also come to find out that they are the new allies of the purifiers that Richter was trying to tell the new X-Men to get the heck out of here for. Now we pick up with Wolverine team fighting against the Marauders and Mr. Sinister. Now Emma Frost is there telepathically to kind of keep Mr. Sinister busy so that Wolverine and his team can figure out if they have the baby or not, which the plan is working, and so Wolverine's team is wiping the floor with the Marauders. Now we pick up with the new X-Men while they are fighting against the Reavers and also trying to save Hellion, who was stabbed by Lady Deathstrike. Now you have Pixie there teleport every single member of the new X-Men and also Richter the heck out of there. Now kind of like Nightcrawler, Pixie cannot teleport a large amount of people at once. And so with that being said, when she teleports everyone out of the base of the purifiers, she almost killed herself and the others doing that. But with that happening, she sends a psychic shockwave to Emma Frost, which tells her that her students need her help right now. But with her focusing on that, she stops trying to keep Mr. Sinister busy for Wolverine's team. So with Emma Frost being unable to stop Mr. Sinister, the Marauders began to beating up on Wolverine and his team to the point where they are being taken out one by one. They are near death with everything that happens to each member. But the biggest thing about this part of the storyline is that Wolverine tells Nightcrawler to tell Cyclops that they don't have the baby. He knows who has the baby. Before we find out who, he just says he has her. But Nightcrawler gets taken out before being able to tell Cyclops who it is. Now we pick up with Cyclops, Emma Frost, and Bishop, who are trying to think on what to do next. That is when they get attacked by Sentinels. Now this is huge because after the House of M event, which again brought the mutant race down in the numbers, the American government put Sentinels, who are piloted by humans, as a way to protect the last few people of the mutant race from any harm. But something happens to the pilots and they lose control of the Sentinels and they attack the X-Men at the X-Mansion. Now this is where we come to find out who really has the baby, which we come to find out that it is Cable. Cable is the one who has the baby at this exact moment. But guys, this is Now, today's video picks up where our last video left off at, with Wolverine and his team trying to get back to the X-Mansion. Because remember that his team went to the home base of the Marauders and Mr. Sinister to see if they have the newborn mutant. But Wolverine found out that Cable is the one who has the baby. But while they were there, his team got beaten down badly. And so right now they have a lot of injuries on the Blackbird and trying to get back home. The problem is they can't reach Cyclops and tell him what they have learned from the Marauders and Mr. Sinister, that Cable is the one who has the baby. And the reason why they can get a hold of Cyclops is because the X-Mansion got attacked by a couple of Sentinels. Now remember, these Sentinels were being piloted by human beings, but something happened to them, and now the Sentinels are trying to kill the X-Men who are at the X-Mansion. Which, something else to remember is that the reason why the government had these Sentinels here is because the mutant race is close to being gone. And so they were put there to protect the last few people of the mutant race. This takes place right after the House of M event. Now, after a few pages of the X-Men fighting against the Sentinels, they were able to defeat these two, but now they have a bunch of other people who are now injured as well, including a lot of their healers. Now we pick up with Mr. Sinister, who is right now talking to Mystique, which they both know that Cable is the one who has the child. But this whole time, they assumed that Cable was working with the X-Men, but now they know that Cable is on his own, which means that Mr. Sinister can send out an army of people to go after him, and he would not stand a chance one bit. And so this is really huge for Cable now. Now we do jump back over to Cyclops, which is us picking up with him the next day, where Cyclops is seeing how bad things are right now. But Wolverine joins him and they talk about what had happened, which Cyclops tells Wolverine that the pilots who were controlling the Sentinels were affected by nanobites that Cassandra Nova made a while back that basically turned them into some hybrid human Sentinels. The question is though, who sent out those nanobites in the first place and what is their plan? But then you have Cyclops say that Wolverine needs to go after Cable and get the child back, which he tells Wolverine to reform the X-Force team and go after Cable, which the X-Force team is the best trackers of the X-Men, but also their best fighters as well. And so after the X-Force team is sent out to go find Cable, we pick up a few hours after that, where you have Charles Xavier again trying to talk to Cyclops, which is something we saw back in our first video, where Charles Xavier is trying to work with Cyclops on how to run the X-Men. But you have Charles saying that basically Cyclops just sent out a bunch of killers after his own son, just to get a baby back. But again, this is Cyclops saying to Charles that he cannot be trusted and that what he is doing is for the betterment of the mutant race and that baby as well. Now, we do jump 80 years into the future, where we pick up with one of the clones of Jamie Madrox and Layla Miller. Now remember, they were sent into the future because Forge has been watching the time stream and found out that after the baby was born, 2 new possible futures were made. And so these two came to this future to see what had happened, which they come to find out that in this future, all mutants were put in camps. The big question is though, what led to this future in the first place? And so for them to figure out what happened in this future, you have Layla Miller and the clone of Jamie Madrox pull a ruse to capture one of the security guards of the camp to ask him what had happened, which he tells them that they should know because the camps were made because of one mutant. Something really big happened because of one of the mutants, which now the question is the future horrible for the mutants because of the baby who was just born in the present day? But before they are able to figure out more about what had happened, more guards come and capture them both. Now we pick up with Wolverine and his X-Force team back in Alaska because this is where everything started from. But you have Wolverine's team back here to see if they are able to get a clue so they can find Cable, because right now that is their new mission. But something to point out this moment is the character Warpath, which he is the character who has super strength, agility, and amazing reflexes, and also enhanced senses as well. but he was the brother of Thunderbird, who was that character who joined the X-Men after the original X-Men left. He only lasted for like 3 books, which we covered his death. But the reason why I'm focusing so much on Warpath is because he is so close to Cable. He hates the idea of hunting down an old friend. But this moment closes with them finding a way to track down Cable. Now we do jump back over to Cable and the baby, which we come to find out they are still safe from any harm until the Reavers appear, which if you guys remember from our last video, these guys are now working with the Purifiers to get the baby from Cable. And so right now it is him fighting against these guys and trying to protect the baby, which leads to a big problem. That is the fact that he is on his own against an army of people. And so he has to think of a way to protect himself from these guys. And so with Cable being surrounded by the Reavers, this does look like this could be his end right here. But at the very last second, you have Wolverine and the X-Force appear, which of course now they start fighting against the Reavers. But at the same time, you have the X-Force remember that their mission is to make sure to get the baby back from Cable as well. And so with Wolverine and his X-Force now being here, it does give Cable the chance to run away, hoping that these two different sides will keep each other busy long enough for him to escape with the baby. Like that is his master plan, to kind of get out of here because these two sides will be busy with each other. Now Warpath sees Cable trying to leave, but again, he sees Cable as a close friend. And so he tries to go after Cable. But since Warpath is now watching his back, when one of the Reavers are about to shoot to kill Warpath, but at the very last second, you have Colleen jump in front of the bullets, which of course he is now killed off. And so now you have a dead X-Men. And I really hope I pronounced his name correctly. Colleen, kind of hard name to pronounce. Now you have Wolverine trying to chase down Cable and get the baby back from Cable. Now the thing is that Cable is able to kind of pull a small ruse to throw Wolverine off so that Cable can do the one thing he needs to do so he can get away from everyone, which is basically stealing the Blackbird that Wolverine brought here to get away. Now we pick up with Cyclops and his X-Men team meeting up with X-Force after their battle between them and the Reavers, which you have the X-Men now freaking out on how they are going to find Cable because the last time they found him was thanks to Colleen, who was just killed off by the Reavers. And so with him dead, they don't really have a way to find Cable again, but you have Cyclops using other methods to find Cable. But while he is waiting for results on where is Cable, you have Cyclops start to think about how he had to let Cable go when he was a baby to save his life. But before he is able to go down memory lane, that is when you have Cyclops get word that Cable is heading to Dallas, Texas, where Forge is at. Which the reason why is because Forge has the time machine. But we shift back over into the future with the clone of Jamie Madrox and also Layla Miller, which right now you have them being processed and about to be thrown inside this mutant camp, which honestly we see them get tortured and beat down on their way to the main part of this camp. But when they get to the main part of this camp, they get to run into some people of the camp and then start talking to them about different things about this camp. But when Layla Miller and Jamie Madrox look at the face of one of the prisoners of the camp, they see a M symbol on the guy's face, which this symbol is only been seen on one person, which is Bishop, because Bishop is from the future, which now we know that this right now is Bishop's future. But jumping back to the present day, we pick up with Cable arriving to the base of Forge to get to use his time machine. The problem is though is that Forge has been shot, it seems, and the big question is now who did this and why would they shoot Forge? That is when you have someone from behind shoot Cable to knock him out. This is where we come to find out that Bishop was the one who shot Forge and then shot Cable as well. And so after Bishop shoots Cable, it is now him about to shoot the baby as well, which is really messed up. But then you have the Marauders appear and they start to fight against Bishop, which now Bishop is a one man trying to fight against an army of people with an array of different powers. And so for him, he does not have enough time to adapt to different attacks that are coming at him all at once. But after a few pages of watching him trying to defeat these guys, he does get knocked out by them, which then leads to Gambit just picking up the baby and they leave with the child and leaving Bishop behind badly injured. And so after Gambit leaves, when Bishop wakes up, Cable is already gone, and so are the Marauders as well. And so his next game plan is for him to basically trying to get out of the base of Forge before the X-Men show up so he can go after the Marauders and get the baby back. The problem with that is when he is trying to track the Marauders, the X-Men are already there. And so when the X-Men walk in, Bishop has to lie to the X-Men about how he had a lead to follow, which led him here with Cable and the baby. But he didn't tell Cyclops and the rest of the X-Men that he got jumped by the Marauders and they took the baby. And so you have Cyclops tell Bishop to join the X-Force team and go track down Cable. Cyclops and the other X-Men are going to focus on finding Gambit. Now, two big things happen to close this video, where we pick up with Layla Miller and the clone of Jimmy Madrox in the future once again, where they're just figuring out that they are in the future of Bishop. But when they still don't have any idea what led to this future, when they go around asking people what led to this future, no one is saying a word. But you have them find the one person who can tell them what happened, which that person is the younger version of Bishop before he grew up and left the future to the present day with the X-Men. But jumping back over to the present day, we pick up with Cable right now taking the Blackbird that he stole from Wolverine earlier. But he now knows that he cannot do this alone, that he needs to call in someone he can trust and will believe what he is doing is the right thing to do. And so the one person he calls in is, of course, Charles Xavier, which now they are going to work together behind the back of Cyclops to get the baby back from the Marauders. And guys, this is where we are going to end today's video. Alright, jumping back into the Messiah complex, we pick up with one of the clones of Jamie Madrox and Layla Miller, which, if you guys remember, they were sent into the future because Forge was looking at the time stream, which led him to see that there are now two possible futures. And so these guys went into one of the futures to see what will happen, but also the fact they found out this future is Bishop's future. And so you have Layla Miller and Jamie Madrox look for the younger version of Bishop before he grew up and left for the present day. They want to know what led to this future in the first place. Now, this is where you have the young Bishop tell us what happened here in his future. That basically the baby was born, which of course grew up to become an adult. But that is when the mutant powers went crazy and killed millions of people, which then led to the government throwing mutants into this camp. Now, you have Bishop keep calling this child the Messiah, which is something the child back in the present day everyone is after has been called a couple times as well. And so with them learning this piece of information, you have Layla Miller kill the clone of Jamie Madrox, which then would send everything he knows back to the original Jamie Madrox, who's in the present day, to tell the X-Men what had happened in the future. But the big problem is, though, that now leaves Layla Miller trapped in the future. Now, picking back up in the present day, we pick up with Cyclops and Emma Frost, who just got word on where is Gambit and the rest of the Marauders. Remember, in our last video, they are the ones who have the baby at the moment. And so it is the X-Men trying to get it back from them. And so with that being said, you have Cyclops send Wolverine, Bishop, and a few other X-Men people to go after the Marauders to get the baby back from them. But as soon as the team leaves to go after the Marauders, you have the original Jamie Madrox wake up from his coma, which I don't think I mentioned this. Since his clones was sent into the future, he fell into a coma, but now woke up with the memories of the future thanks to his clone. And so he tells Cyclops and Emma Frost they need to stop Bishop because he is planning to kill the baby. Now we do pick up with Cable and Charles Xavier. If you remember at the end of our last video, we saw Cable call up Charles Xavier asking for help, which Charles Xavier will help Cable as long as he likes what he hears. And so if Cable tells Charles Xavier that sounds like Charles needs to shut the mind down of Cable, he will do it. Because that child is supposed to be the savior of the mutant race. And so you have Cable tell Charles Xavier that he has seen the future, and the future is messed up. But if the child is alive and get the proper care like it should, well, Bishop future won't happen. Instead, this child be able to save the mutant race and the humans race as well. But we then see Charles Xavier tell Cable they are heading to Muir Island because the baby and the Marauders are hiding out over there. And so we now jump over to Muir Island and we pick up with Gambit, which this is going to be the huge thing about this part of the story, because you didn't have Gambit hand over the baby to Mr. Sinister. But we come to find out that this is not Mr. Sinister. This is Mystique. And she just killed Mr. Sinister because she has a different plan for the baby. The big question now is, what is her big plan for the baby? But while they are taking the baby somewhere, the other Marauders are waiting outside, which then they hear something coming from behind. On to see X-Force, they're ready to take them down and get the baby back from them. And while that is going on, we jump back over to the X-Mansion, which we now pick up with the new X-Men, where we see that they are waiting for the X-Men to return back home. Which, while these young X-Men are waiting, they find Predator X. Remember, this creature was made to hunt down mutants, and so his hunt led him here to the X-Mansion to try to kill some of the X-Men people. But we then jump over to Mystique and Gambit. And this is huge because she is planning to use the baby as a way to help Rogue out. Because before this storyline, Rogue got put in a coma because she was shot. Now, Mr. Sinister kept Rogue alive only because she is holding information about Destiny Diaries. Destiny was this character who had the ability to see a possible future, meaning that it wasn't 100% for sure going to happen. Now, the diaries hold information about possible futures to come. And so Mystique's game plan is to use the baby, hoping it will heal Rogue and she'll be able to tell what Destiny Diaries were holding. Now, usually when it comes to Rogue, when someone stays in contact with her over a long period of time, she usually puts them in a coma or could lead to them actually dying. But right after the baby touches Rogue, we see two things happen here. Rogue does not wake up from her coma, and the second, the baby actually lives after holding long contact with Rogue, which for Gambit, this is a huge thing for him to see this happen. Now, while you have X-Force fighting against the Marauders outside the building, this is where the story brings almost everyone here for the big final battle. Because right after the X-Force gets there, you also have Cyclops and a few other X-Men appear for the final battle here on Muir Island, which Cyclops team now knows that Bishop is really not a good guy, that he is actually here to kill the baby. And so right now you have Cyclops trying to find Bishop, but then you also have the new X-Men arrive, because back at the X Mansion, they were fighting against Predator X. But then you have Pixie teleport everyone to Muir Island because they need X-23 or Wolverine to help kill Predator X. Wait, we are still not done, because off the shore of the island, you have Cable and Charles Xavier appear for the big final battle as well. And so everyone is here for this big final battle now on Muir Island. Now you do have Cable and Charles Xavier sneak into the base of the Marauders and make Gambit hand over the baby so they get to safety. But right when Cable gets the baby, you have Bishop appear again trying to kill the baby, and also Predator X as well. Now, with everyone fighting against each other, it is basically an all-out war here. But that is when you have Cyclops walk up on Cable. This is where you have Cyclops tell Cable to give him the baby, because this baby has been seen as the messiah for the mutant race. Because the last couple years, there is only a few hundreds of mutants left on Earth. And so the X-Men believe this baby could be the meaning of the return of the mutant race numbers. But you have Cable trying to show Cyclops that the baby is not safe, because there is an all-out battle happening around them right now. But then you have Charles Xavier tell Cable to give the baby over to Cyclops. Now, Rogue does wake up from her coma, which is huge, because this is her now getting put back on as active for rioters to use. But after she wakes up, Mystique tells her that she used the baby to save her life. But Rogue gets pissed off because the fact Mystique used a child to basically save her life. Because Rogue is now hearing that a child was used and could have been killed to bring her back. And so you have Rogue use her powers to kind of put Mystique asleep by just keeping long contact with her for a long period of time, which Mystique is now knocked out. And you have her leave to get away from the X-Men and all of this crazy mess that is going on. Now, real quick, I want to jump back over to Wolverine and X-Force team, because this is where we see the death of this version of Predator X, with Wolverine getting eaten up by it, and then you have the classic move where he just cuts his way out of the monster through the gut. And so this is where we see the end of Predator X in this storyline right here. Now, to close the Messiah Complex storyline, we jump back to Cyclops, Cable, and Charles Xavier, because remember that Cable just gave the baby over to Cyclops. But when Cyclops is holding the baby in his arms, this is where you have Cyclops realize that maybe he should give the baby back over to Cable, because he remembers when Cable was taken into the future to be saved from the techno virus, or really find a way to fight the virus. But Cable was taken into the future to be saved. And so Cyclops is looking around thinking about what had happened here with all these different battles. And so this is where you have Cyclops give the baby back over to Cable, telling him to take the baby with him into the future so it can survive before anyone else tries to get the baby at all. Now here comes the finale for this story, where as soon as Cyclops hands the baby over to Cable, you have Bishop once again try to stop what he believes could lead to his future, because that baby in his timeline is the reason why 1 million people were killed, which then led to mutants being forced into camps. But when Bishop tries to kill Cable and get the baby, he actually ends up killing Charles Xavier, which this is where you have Charles Xavier removed from the X-Men landscape, but then you have Cyclops say that the X-Men are no more now. There will be no more X-Men. Alright guys, so this is the end of the video. Now real quick thoughts about this book. Guys, I love this storyline so much. I actually have both a physical copy and a digital copy of this book because honestly, it's just so amazing to me. Like 13 books came together and said, hey, here's a storyline of everybody fighting over a child. But the thing is though, there is not really a dull moment to me personally in this book. I mean, each chapter you read in this book is kind of like, what will happen next? Oh my God, that happened next. What's next? That happens next. And to me, honestly, every single like big surprise was a good surprise to me. Also, we finally learned a little bit about Bishop's future. That was the big thing about Bishop because before this book came out, Bishop was this one character who came from the future in the 90s. He's kind of like, I'm here to save the future. I have to change the future. And like, Marvel never did anything really with the character at all. I mean, he had a few storylines, but honestly, nothing really helped out and said, hey, all these things he's doing right now is to change the future. And by the 2000s, he was a background character. But with this storyline right here, it was kind of cool to say, oh, okay, cool. Like his future basically started because of the child that was born in this storyline. Now also guys, if you did not know, this is the beginning of Hope Summers, the child of Cable, the granddaughter of Cyclops. Like the whole Hope Summer thing begins here and will go on for like a few years and then she will disappear. But guys, honestly, this is one of my favorite storylines. It is one I do recommend you guys go pick up and purchase. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up today's video. So please leave me a like down below and also subscribe for more comic book stories in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I will see you on the next comic book video. Later, guys.